No one is born to be looked down on. Yet most of us have tasted that feeling at least once in our lives. It is not a slap, not a public insult, but the heavy silence pressing on your chest when someone crosses your boundary and you still smile. It is the moment you swallow a word, a reaction, just to keep the peace. It is when you try to stay gentle and kind so things do not get worse, only to realize that the more you bow, the more you are dismissed. Some wounds do not bleed, yet they slowly erase who you are, little by little. You may not remember exactly when it began. Maybe it was in a meeting when someone interrupted you and you said nothing. Maybe it was in a relationship when you accepted something that hurt you just because you were afraid of hurting the other person. Or maybe it was in a conversation when you pretended to agree just to avoid an argument. Each time, a small part of you folded in, shrank, fell silent. You told yourself you were keeping the peace, but in truth, you were giving up your right to be respected. And strangely, the world seems to notice that faster than you think. The truth is, people do not respond to kindness. They respond to boundaries. There is a great difference between being liked and being respected, but most of us do not realize it until it is too late. When you live only to please others, you think you are spreading goodwill, but you are really sending a signal that says, I will endure, I will yield, I will not make you uncomfortable. And the world, which is not gentle by nature, takes that as an invitation. The more you want to be loved, the more people will test you. The more you want peace, the more they will drag you into conflict. The more you try to do what is right, the more you will be pushed aside. One day you look around and see that the blunt, the cold, even the ruthless are the ones who receive the respect you never had. They do not need to explain. They do not need to beg. They simply exist, and others adjust themselves. Meanwhile, you, who only wanted things to be fine, always have to strain to be heard. Maybe you have asked yourself, why? Why? When I am good, do people not treat me the same? The answer is cruel but true. Kindness alone does not make people respect you. What they respect is the foundation that kindness stands on. If your kindness is built on fear, fear of being disliked, abandoned, or misunderstood, it is no longer kindness, but weakness disguised as a smile. People do not respect that because deep down, human instinct only admires those who know their own limits. The world does not run on the logic of morality, but on the logic of power. Power not in the political sense, but in the energy between people. Every meeting, every relationship, whether friendship, work, or love, has an invisible order. No one says it out loud, but everyone feels who leads, who yields, who can be tested. And the moment you let someone cross your line without reacting, you hand them a map that says, here is where you can step in. You might think that sounds pessimistic, but it is only realistic. People respect boundaries, not promises. They admire strength, not submission. Even the kindest souls subconsciously respond more strongly to those who hold their ground, not because they are cruel, but because the human mind is wired to sense risk. When someone radiates firmness, our brain understands, this person could hurt me if I go too far, and only then do we adjust ourselves. The paradox is, you do not need to become harsh or cold to be respected. What you need is the power of clarity, a no spoken without trembling, a steady gaze that does not fear another's eyes, a silence that comes not from fear, but from knowing you have nothing to prove. That kind of strength makes people pause before testing you, makes them feel in the air that you are not someone to be stepped on. Then you may ask yourself, if I become strong like that, will I still be me? Will I lose the gentleness and compassion I value? That question marks the beginning of awakening, because what you fear is not losing kindness, but losing love. You fear that if you stop pleasing others, they will leave, that if you speak your truth, no one will stay. But perhaps people stay not because of who you are, but because of what they get from you. At some point, you start to see how unfair that is. Why are manipulators, cold and ruthless people admired? Why does gentleness become a reason to be overlooked? The answer lies not in the cruelty of the world, but in the deeper mechanics of human psychology. We respect what has the power to make us stop. When kindness lacks that power, it becomes a sign of weakness. And in nature, weakness is not protected, it is exploited. Do not misunderstand. This does not mean you must become emotionless or cruel. Machiavelli wrote 5 centuries ago, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." He was not encouraging cruelty, but revealing a truth few dare to face. The love of others is fragile, but respect endures. When people fear losing you, they act with restraint. When they believe you will always be there no matter how they behave, they stop respecting you. That is why kindness cannot stand alone. It needs a spine made of boundaries. Without it, it melts into weakness. Kindness without limits is like light without shadow, dazzling for a moment, then fading away under the weight of others. Think of the last time you felt disrespected. It was not because you were not good enough, but because you did not keep enough distance for others to see you clearly. You do not need to change who you are. Just understand that kindness is not submission. Gentleness is not weakness. Forgiveness does not mean permission. And when you know when to stop, when you know how to guard your boundaries, something strange begins to happen. The world starts to change the way it looks at you. No more pity in their eyes. No more condescending tone. Only a cautious silence. And within that silence, there is respect. Perhaps that is the first step to reclaiming your place. Not to dominate anyone, but to stop being trampled, to love without being hurt, to give without being used, to live kindly without bowing your head. Because in the end, none of us were born to be looked down on. But if we do not set our own limits, the world will teach us that lesson in the harshest way possible. People often think respect comes from kindness, but in truth, it comes from the strength beneath that kindness. Not the strength of muscles or social power, but a subtler kind of power, the ability to make others feel that you have limits. Respect does not arise from promises, but from the quiet sense that they cannot push any further. Have you ever noticed that when someone speaks slowly, keeps their eyes steady, and stands upright, the energy of the entire room shifts? No one dares interrupt them, not because they are intimidating, but because they make others feel as if they are standing before a solid wall. Respect cannot be begged for. It can only be created through boundaries. People will test you with teasing words, small requests, harmless experiments, and if you stay silent, they will take one more step. The world is not crueler than you think. It is simply more honest. Human beings always test who can be bent. If you do not build a frame of limits, you are silently declaring that you have none to protect. Your kindness, no matter how sincere, will be seen as an open invitation. Think back to the last time someone made you feel small. Maybe it was a judging look or a tone laced with disdain. You wanted to react, but you were afraid of conflict, afraid of upsetting them. So you smiled it off. What you did not realize was that at that very moment, the balance between you and that person shifted. You thought you were keeping the peace, but in truth, you had just given them the right to define your worth. And it will happen again, softer this time, deeper, until you start believing that silence is the safest way to live. The truth is, kindness only holds value when it is wrapped in firmness. If you only know how to give, but never say enough, you will quickly become someone others take advantage of. Not because they are bad, but because human instinct always seeks the path of least resistance. If you are always easy, you become that path. And while you struggle to keep your decency alive, others climb over your shoulders without even realizing who they are stepping on. On the other hand, when someone knows how to say no, even gently and without explanation, they send a clear message. I have boundaries. Psychology shows that people respond to fear with attention. When you set a limit, whether through silence or action, the other person's brain automatically registers that forbidden zone. Like an invisible electric fence, it creates safe distance without a single threat. And that makes them respect you more, sometimes even admire you, even if they do not like you. You see, respect does not come from trying to make others happy. It comes from helping them realize they cannot make you step away from your values. Some people never need to raise their voices, yet through their silence, others know exactly where to stop. Because that silence is not surrender, it is complete control. In a chaotic world, the one who stays calm under pressure is the strongest person in the room. But some people misunderstand this. They think that to earn respect, they must become harsh, make others afraid, or shout louder to avoid being overrun. They turn toughness into armor to hide their wounds, and in trying to prove their strength, they lose their peace. They fail to see that fear created by threats is not true respect. It is only avoidance. And avoidance always comes to an end, because people can tolerate fear, but never humiliation. True strength does not lie in domination, but in staying calm when others try to drag you into chaos. The truly strong do not need to prove anything. They do not need to explain or manipulate. They just say no and stay firm. They do not smile when they are not happy, and they do not nod when their heart says stop. And that alone is enough to make others adjust their behavior. Sometimes, your silence is the most powerful answer. When you walk away from a toxic conversation without defending yourself, when you stop explaining to someone who refuses to understand, when you no longer beg for empathy from those unwilling to give it, that is when you are teaching the world how to treat you. People only learn from the boundaries you truly believe in. Notice how those with real power carry themselves. They do not need to speak loudly or take the spotlight. Yet people can feel that there is something in them that cannot be touched. They carry an inner order, their own structure. They do not rush to react or need to win every exchange, because they know their silence is worth more than 1,000 justifications. And when they speak, every word has weight, not because their language is sharp, but because their inner attitude has been forged. You may think you do not have that kind of energy, that you are too gentle, too sensitive. But strength is not about how tough you appear. It is about how honest you are with your own feelings. The truly weak are those who must pretend to be strong to earn respect. The truly strong are those who can say, "I am not okay with this," and stop. That kind of strength does not need to be shown. It is felt and it is revered. When you protect a sacred space within yourself, a place no one is allowed to touch, you begin to radiate a different kind of energy. People start to choose their words more carefully around you. They do not dare to joke beyond limits or use closeness as an excuse for disrespect. You do not need to command, because your very presence becomes a command. That is what Machiavelli once referred to. Though he spoke of rulers, it applies to everyone. Those who do not know how to set boundaries will always be pushed to the edge. This world, for all its change, still follows one ancient law. Those with boundaries are respected, those without are overrun. When you do not know how to stop, others will not know where to stop. When your kindness has no frame, it will be shaped into whatever others need. But once you draw a clear line, everything changes. You do not need to threaten. You only need to exist as someone who cannot be dismissed. Respect, in the end, is not a gift others give you. It is the natural response to standing before someone who knows their own worth. And that worth does not need to be proven, only lived through every action, every look, every silence. No one can walk over you unless you open the way. And once you understand that, you will see. Kindness never disappears. It simply gains weight. At some point, you will realize that kindness alone is not enough to make people respect you. It may make you liked, perhaps even loved, but being liked and being respected are two entirely different things. People may enjoy your company, smile at you, make use of you, yet deep in their eyes, there is no admiration. And you know it. You can feel it in every conversation, in every reluctant nod, in the way they interrupt you without hesitation. Your kindness, instead of earning appreciation, becomes an invitation for them to see how much you can endure. You start to wonder, am I too gentle, or am I not strong enough? But then you fear that if you become tougher, you might lose your true self, that warm part of you that listens and empathizes. So you find yourself trapped between two extremes. Be too kind, and you are overrun. Be too strong, and you fear becoming cold. It feels like walking a tightrope between goodness and survival. This quiet conflict exhausts you, yet it awakens a question you have never asked before. Is there a way to stay kind without being weak? No one teaches us this. Since childhood, we were told to give, to be kind, to put others first. But no one told us that without knowing when to stop, that kindness can become a chain. You grow up carrying those lessons into a world that does not work the same way. The world does not reward kindness. It responds to strength. You try to stay gentle, hoping to be appreciated. But the more you give, the more people take you for granted. And when you finally grow tired and stop, they act surprised, even angry. They say, "You have changed," but you have not. You are simply beginning to protect yourself. Perhaps you are in that very place now, where you feel hurt but do not want to turn cold, where you still believe in goodness but do not want to be seen as naive, where you want to be loved, but no longer at the cost of your self-respect. It is the most beautiful, yet the hardest stage of growth, because to be respected, you must be willing to lose approval. To keep yourself, you must accept that not everyone will like you anymore. And though it hurts, that is the beginning of freedom. There is something you should know. Gentleness does not disappear when you start saying no. It simply becomes wiser. A person who knows how to protect themselves is not someone who loves less, but someone who loves in the right way. Because love without boundaries turns into submission. Forgiveness is not to let others escape their mistakes, but to free yourself from being the victim. True kindness always has a backbone. Without it, it will eventually break. When you realize this, the world around you begins to change. You start saying yes less often, explaining less, seeking approval less. At first, it feels strange, maybe even a bit guilty, but gradually, you will feel lighter. You will find time for yourself, no longer chasing one-sided relationships. You will stop fearing who leaves, because you will know that those who stay are the ones who respect your worth. And with every no you dare to say, your heart grows stronger. Not proud, but steady. Of course, not everyone will like this new version of you. Some will say you have become cold. Others will call you selfish. But that is only because they were used to the version of you that was easy, compliant, and accommodating. When they can no longer control you, they will accuse you of changing. Do not let that pull you back. Every criticism, every irritated look, take it as a sign you are moving in the right direction, because those who criticize you are often the ones who once benefited from your softness. And if right now, as you read this, you feel something stir deep inside, take a moment, let your mind breathe. Maybe you have been silent too long, endured too much, forgotten that your voice also deserves to be heard. Speak up in whatever way feels right. Leave a comment, share your thoughts, or even just a single dot, as a reminder that you are here, learning to reclaim your place. Sometimes, even a small act like that is enough to start the change. Kindness is not blind sacrifice. It is a conscious choice. It is only truly beautiful when you know that you could say no, but still choose yes. The power of kindness lies in giving freely, without fear, without need, without begging to be loved. When you give from a place of wholeness, no one can exploit you. When you say enough with calm certainty, no one can belittle you. And when you walk away from where you are not respected, that is not coldness. That is love for yourself in its purest form. There will be nights when you wonder if you are doing the right thing, when people you once catered to now seem distant. But you will come to see that they never truly left. They simply revealed what the relationship really was. Any connection that requires your silence to survive was never worth keeping. What you are letting go of now is not love, but illusion. And when illusion fades, you will find a different kind of love, deeper, calmer, born from self-respect. No one can step on you unless you lie down. No one can look down on you unless you first look down on yourself. Change does not begin when you ask others to treat you differently. It begins the moment you decide to stop accepting less than you deserve. In that moment, your kindness will no longer be a bleeding wound, but a light that fills the room without dimming itself. And then you will understand. To be liked is easy, but to be respected, that is the real victory. Some people are born seeing the world through a different lens. They are not lulled by sweet words about kindness. They see how people truly behave when their interests are threatened. Machiavelli was one of them. He lived among deceitful courts, where vows of loyalty were cloaks for betrayal. In the midst of wars and schemes, he discovered what most humans spend their lives avoiding, that people do not respect kindness. They only respect strength, not the kind that inspires fear, but the kind that makes others instinctively know they cannot cross you. Many despised Machiavelli, calling him cruel, cold, a champion of tyranny. But if you look closer, you will see that he was simply facing the truth others refused to see. He did not write about how people should live. He wrote about how people actually live. And in that world, those without boundaries were always devoured. He said, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." That was not advice to be ruthless, but a warning to those who still believe kindness alone can protect them. Think about that in your own life. At work, in love, in your family. Have you ever been taken advantage of because you were afraid of being disliked? Have you ever stayed silent believing silence was noble, and afterward, did they not push further, assuming you would always stay that way? That is the very moment Machiavelli saw centuries ago. Kindness without limits is not virtue. It is a noble form of foolishness. It makes you think you are doing right, while you are actually being controlled by your own goodness. What he truly meant was that no love lasts without being built on respect. People love you when they need you, but will turn away when their interests shift. Only boundaries preserve balance. The fear Machiavelli spoke of was not born from violence, but from reverence. From the awareness that the other person possesses strength, will, and self-respect. People do not betray those they admire. They betray those they believe will forgive them forever. The truth is, in any relationship, love without boundaries eventually collapses. When you allow someone to take a little more, you are teaching them they can take a lot more. When you let someone hurt you without reacting, you are silently saying you do not deserve better. And in that silence, you lose the right to define yourself. You stop being the author of the relationship and become its victim. Machiavelli was not promoting control. He was reminding us that if you do not lead the game, someone else will. The world he lived in may have passed, but human nature has not changed. In politics or in love, the rule remains the same. Those who set boundaries are respected more than those who simply wish to be loved. A leader loses authority when trying to please everyone. A lover loses dignity when afraid to upset the other, because in the eyes of others, that fear is not love, it is weakness. And no one respects weakness, even when it wears the mask of kindness. Machiavelli once wrote, "Men sooner forget the death of their father than the loss of their patrimony." In other words, people forget favors quickly, but they never forget those who make them cautious. That is not cynicism, it is an observation of instinct. When someone makes you pause before you speak or act, you already respect them. When someone always yields, you soon see their yielding as a given. You can give freely, but without limits, your giving becomes an obligation. And once that happens, kindness loses its value, and you lose your sense of self. This world does not belong to the cruel, but neither does it belong to the overly kind. It belongs to those who know how to balance the two, who know when to be firm, when to be gentle, when to speak, and when to stay silent. Like a commander who never reveals all his cards, you do not need to show all your heart. True power is not in expression, but in restraint. In that restraint, others sense your boundaries, and boundaries are the language of respect. You might think all this sounds cold, but remember, coldness and clarity are not the same. Clarity does not destroy compassion, it protects it. When you learn to set boundaries, your kindness no longer drains you. It stops being something others exploit and becomes a gift you choose to give. And every gift with real value is one given consciously. Machiavelli, in his age of betrayal and ambition, understood what we are still learning today. If you want to be loved, you must be willing to be disliked. If you want to be respected, you must be willing to make others uncomfortable. No one can please everyone and still keep their self-respect, and neither can you. You cannot expect unconditional love if you are too afraid to voice your needs. When you stop trying to prove that you are a good person and start living as a person of worth, the world will adjust. Those meant to stay will learn to respect you. Those who cannot handle your boundaries will drift away. That is not loss. That is purification. As Machiavelli said, true power is not in controlling others, but in not letting anyone control you. In the end, he taught one simple yet profound truth. Know the nature of people, but never lose your own. Use that understanding as a mirror, not to become cold, but to become wise. Because the world does not need more closed hearts. It needs hearts that can love deeply and still protect themselves. And when you learn that, your kindness will no longer be a wound, but a source of quiet strength, one that needs no proof, yet everyone can feel. Between being feared and being hated lies a very thin line, and only those who truly understand themselves can walk it without falling. Because the moment you begin to show strength, the world will test you through glances, words, and seemingly innocent actions. Some will step back, but others will try to pull you back into your old role, the one who always yields, who stays pleasant, who carries the weight for everyone else. And if you are not steady enough, you will soften again, smile it off again, apologize again for something that was never your fault. And the cycle repeats. Respect does not come from the fear you create, but from the confidence you radiate. A person who knows their place does not need to threaten anyone. They do not shout to prove their power, nor use sharp words to make others bow. They simply carry a quiet energy that says, I know who I am, and I know what I will not accept. When you stand firm in that energy, others feel it without a word. They adjust their tone, their behavior, even their attitude, not because they fear you, but because they know you are not someone to test. Many confuse power with control. They think to be respected means to command, to make others afraid. But that is only the mask of insecurity. True power does not lie in making people bow, but in making them look up with caution. They do not fear that you will harm them. They fear losing your respect. And that respect, strangely, is what keeps them close, what makes them want to be better when they are around you. Those with real authority make others feel safe, but never so comfortable that they are taken for granted. They let you come close, but only as far as they allow. They listen, but they never let anyone control their emotions. They can be soft, but soft like water, which can turn into waves when needed. That flexibility is what builds lasting strength, because they do not try to prove anything, nor do they need validation from anyone. Some people can walk into a room without saying a word, and the atmosphere shifts. You do not know why, but you find yourself speaking more carefully around them. They do not need to appear powerful. They are power itself. Machiavelli once said that a wise ruler never lets his people fear him so much that they begin to hate him, because excessive fear breeds rebellion. Likewise in life, if you are too cold, people withdraw, but if you are too soft, they overstep. True power lies in knowing when to stop. That balance does not come overnight. It begins with small things. The moment you say no without shaking, the time you look up when questioned, the time you stay silent when someone expects you to beg. At first, you may feel guilty, like you are becoming someone unfamiliar. But that is only your old habit dying. Each small act is a brick in the wall you build around your peace, not to shut the world out, but to protect your calm within. And slowly, people will understand that they may not like everything you do, but they will have to respect you. As you learn to stand firm, something interesting happens. You stop needing to argue so much. You stop needing to prove who is right or wrong. You speak once, and if the other person refuses to understand, you stop. Your silence unsettles them more than 1,000 explanations, because real power always lies in knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. The one who controls themselves holds more power than anyone who controls others. There is a kind of authority that needs no display, latent power. It lives in your posture, in your calm eyes, in the way you do not react to provocation. Those with this strength do not need to threaten, because their stillness alone makes others cautious. They do not punish, yet everyone understands that crossing the line has consequences. It is the kind of power that makes people regulate themselves, not out of fear, but out of respect. And the most important truth, respect does not mean others must always agree with you. It means they do not dare to dismiss you, even when they disagree. Your presence is strong enough to make them confront their own attitude. In a world where everyone is shouting to be heard, the one who speaks less is often the one people listen to the longest. But to reach that point, you must be willing to let go. When you start setting boundaries, some people will leave. They are not used to seeing you stand tall, and they will call you cold or changed. Let them talk. They are only revealing the truth, that before, they stayed not because they loved you, but because they could control you. Losing them is not a loss, it is release. And then, those who remain, the ones who still look at you with respect, are the ones worth keeping. They understand that your silence is not distance, but dignity. They know you can be kind, but not weak, forgiving, but not blind. When they speak to you, they do so more carefully, more honestly, more deeply, because they know you are no longer someone to test. From that moment, you begin to see something clearly. You do not need to make others fear you. You only need them to know that respect is not negotiable. And to achieve that, you do not need to shout or seek to impress. You only need to live in alignment with your values, steady, clear, and calm. When others realize that they cannot shake you, they stop trying to control you. They step back. And in that distance, respect is born. Respect is not something you chase. It arrives naturally when you stop fearing its loss. When you can keep your peace, choose what is right over what is easy, and walk away from places where you are not valued. You become the kind of person Machiavelli described, the one who makes others think twice before crossing the line. And in that moment, you no longer need recognition. Your silence itself becomes proof of true strength. But there is a deeper truth beneath it all. Sometimes, even when we understand that we must be strong and have boundaries, we still fail to act. Even when we know we should say no, we still smile. Even when we know we should leave, we still stay. And at that moment, we begin to realize that the problem is no longer about others, but about what lies within us. Because something invisible, deeper than logic, is holding us back. That something is fear. Not the fear of being hurt, but the fear of being left behind. Many of us carry an old conditioning without ever realizing it. From childhood, we were taught that only when we behaved were we loved. Only when we pleased others were we accepted. A child who feared being scolded learned to smile to ease the tension. A child who was ignored when reacting learned to stay silent to keep the peace. And as adults, those reactions become instinct. We yield not because we want to, but because we are afraid. We give not out of love, but out of fear of losing love. These habits run so deep, we no longer see them. We think we choose kindness, but that kindness is often an old survival pattern. When someone fears losing connection, they will do anything to keep it, even at the cost of themselves. They say yes when they want to say no. They smile when they want to cry. They apologize when they have done nothing wrong. And slowly, they lose sight of where their boundaries are. They can no longer tell the difference between love and fear, between kindness and self-destruction. That is why so many people, even after learning about boundaries, still find themselves being taken advantage of. Their minds know what to do, but their emotions will not let them act. Every time they want to speak up, old memories awaken. Memories of being scolded, abandoned, or met with silence. Their bodies remember those moments even more vividly than their minds, so they choose safety again. But that kind of safety does not save them. It kills them slowly. The painful truth is this: when you do not respect yourself, no one else will do it for you. When you let fear lead, you are sending a message to the world that says, "I am not worth protecting." And the world will answer accordingly. People respond to the signals you send. They sense your energy long before you speak. If your eyes hesitate, if your voice carries pleading, if your gestures show self-doubt, they will know how far they can test you. Respect is not something others give you. It is something you create from within. If you still fear being abandoned, you will always try to please. If you still believe you must shrink to keep the peace, you will always end up in unfair relationships. Self-respect begins when you face that fear. Ask yourself, what if they get angry? What if they leave? Would I still exist without their approval? The answers may shake you at first, but they are the beginning of freedom. There will come a moment when you understand that no one can truly leave you unless they were never really there. Those who walk away because you finally set a boundary were never with you. They were with their own benefit. When you stand firm, some people will disappear, but in the space they leave behind, you will finally be able to breathe. It may feel lonely at first, but soon it becomes peaceful. You will discover that silence can also be a kind of calm. Change does not happen the moment you read a wise quote. It happens the moment you act differently. When you say no for the first time despite the fear, when you stay silent instead of explaining, when you walk away instead of staying longer. Each act is a small piece, rebuilding your image in your own eyes. Step by step, you begin to believe that you deserve better. And as that belief grows, others begin to believe it too. Of course, there will be resistance. Some will call you selfish. Others will say you have changed. But do not fear that. When you stop living to please, you will unsettle those who benefited from your compliance. They are not losing you. They are losing the privilege of control. Let them go. Only when they leave can you make space for relationships built on balance, where you no longer have to shrink to be loved. And then you will notice something shift. The people who once dismissed you will start choosing their words more carefully. Those who used to interrupt now begin to listen. Not because you have become someone else, but because your energy has changed. You no longer seek approval. You no longer fear being misunderstood. You no longer try to prove your worth. And in that calm, true power is born. The power of someone no longer ruled by fear. From the moment you choose to respect yourself, healing begins. You do not have to force strength or pretend to be tough. You only need to be honest. I am tired. I no longer want to endure. I choose myself. When you say that, you are calling back the parts of you that were left behind, the parts silenced and forgotten in your effort to be good. They return, piece by piece, and together they rebuild you whole, clear, and unafraid. Then you will see that respect is not a demand. It is the natural result of self-respect. Others reflect the way you treat yourself. If you know when to stay silent, they will listen. If you know when to walk away, they will understand your worth. And if you live with the belief that you are worthy, they will start to believe it too. You do not need to fight or persuade. You only need to exist with that quiet certainty. Perhaps this is the lesson Machiavelli never wrote, but surely understood. No power is more enduring than the power that comes from self-awareness. When you stop running from your own fear, no one outside you can control you. And then you will realize that every battle for respect begins within, not by making others fear you, but by freeing yourself from the fear of them. There will come a time when you must stand before a choice with no middle path, to keep pleasing others for the sake of fragile affection, or to begin living as someone who knows they deserve respect. You cannot have both, because once you choose approval, you lose yourself. But when you choose yourself, you must accept that some people will no longer stay. That is the price of freedom, and it is always worth it. No one in this world can give you respect if you do not claim it for yourself. No one can treat you right if you do not show them where the line is drawn. True strength does not come from becoming cold, but from the moment you dare to say, no, not this time, not again. A simple phrase, yet it carries a lifetime of learning to stand tall. When you can say it without trembling, you have crossed the line between the pleaser and the self-possessed. From that moment on, you no longer need to shout to be heard. You no longer need to argue to prove you are right. Your strength lives in your stillness, in the way you hold your posture, in the steadiness of your eyes. Others can sense it, they hear it in your breath, they see it in your movements. And that calm makes them cautious, because no one knows how you will react if they cross the line. You do not threaten, but they understand there will be consequences. Kindness without strength makes you fragile. But kindness, built upon self-respect, becomes a form of power that changes how the world sees you. Because a truly kind person never begs to be loved. They give because they want to, not because they fear losing. They listen, but are not manipulated. They forgive, but do not forget. They love, but know when to stop. And within those boundaries lies a quiet beauty. The beauty of someone who has learned that self-love is not selfishness, but the foundation of every healthy relationship. The world will respond differently when your energy shifts. Those used to your submission will feel uncomfortable. They will test you. They will demand the old dynamic back. They will say you are not the same. But do not fear that. Their discomfort is simply the sound of the roles they once assigned to you breaking apart. Some will leave, and that is natural. Because when you stop playing the role of the endlessly kind one, only those who are genuine will stay. And one day, you will see the world begin to mirror your change. People will listen when you speak. They will notice your presence. They will respect the silence you create, because they sense that your quiet is not fear, but choice. And when you choose to speak, your words will carry more weight, more depth, not because you have become powerful, but because you no longer need to be loved. When you stop trying to be loved, you will be respected. And when you are respected, love, if it comes, will look different. It will no longer be a game of dependence, but a meeting between two whole people who each know their worth. You will love not to fill a void, but to share your fullness. That is love without fear, built between two who do not need each other to exist, but choose each other to continue. Machiavelli may have written about kings, but what he understood about people remains true for you. He knew that the love of the crowd is fragile, but respect endures. Love can fade the moment you say no, but respect is born from that same moment. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Not because fear is greater than love, but because that fear is often the roughest form of respect. Yet today, you no longer need to make anyone fear you. You only need to make them understand that your kindness has limits, and crossing those limits means losing something precious. From that point on, everything changes. You no longer strain to prove your worth, no longer beg for affection. You stand still, and others begin to adjust. You no longer wear a mask of gentleness to be accepted, because you have learned to accept yourself. And in that moment, your kindness returns to its pure form, strong, wise, and untouchable. The person who was once dismissed can now look back and smile, not with pride, but with calm understanding. You do not need to become cold. You only need to become whole. Someone who still loves, but remembers to protect themselves. Someone who still gives, but keeps the best part for themselves. Someone still gentle, but no longer mistaken for weak. And from that moment on, you will no longer fear being looked down on, because you now understand that respect does not come from making others bow, but from making them look up and truly see you, clear, steady, no longer asking for sympathy. That is when kindness and strength become one. When you no longer need to speak, yet the world grows silent. When you walk away without looking back, knowing that those meant to stay will find their own way to follow. In the end, true maturity is not learning how to make others fear you, but learning how to stop fearing them. When you reach that point, you will see that kindness was never weakness. It only needed a sword and a shield to survive in this world. And when you carry them, not to fight, but to protect, you will realize that the strongest person is still the one who knows how to love, but knows how to love the right way. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. If this message touched your heart, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss the next journey we take together. Your support means the world to me.